Hi, my name is Leela Brock, and I have always had an interest in true crime. I like to watch true crime documentaries in my free time and even read true crime books, so that led me to pick my topic for this week's speech called 3 of the Most Notorious Serial Killers. And before I get started in this speech, I would just like everybody to know I am not trying to glorify these serial killers in any way. I just want to bring to light the horrors of what they did and how it truly had an effect on our justice system and our society as a whole in the United States. So, before we get talking about these serial killers, we must know what exactly a serial killer is. So, a serial killer isn't just anyone who goes and murders somebody. Actually, stated in an article called Working Definition of Serial Murderers, written by the U.S. Department of Justice, a serial killer is someone who commits 2 or more murders separated by a long period of time. Investigators typically call this a cooling off period. These murders typically take place in different geological areas. So you won't really see a serial killer killing most of their victims in one area. They like to hop around, that way they can get away with it longer. So our first serial killer is Jeffrey Dahmer. This is a very renowned serial killer. Lots of people like to watch documentaries about him. I know Netflix just came out with a show about a year ago that tells the story of his life and brings to light all of his victims. So Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21st of 1960. And as stated in an article written by the True Crime Library in 2022, he killed 17 victims between the years 1978 and 1991. His victim type was typically young males. Jeffrey Dahmer was gay, so he went to gay bars typically to pick up his victims. That's where most of them were from. His modus operandi, also known as an MO, which is something that a serial killer does to each victim, and that's typically how investigators can link these victims, is rape, dismemberment, necrophilia, and cannibalism. That is one thing that really was off-putting about Jeffrey Dahmer, is he would save organs of his victims, he would wrap it up and store it in his fridge, and he would eat it, which is so monstrous. I can't even imagine it. His sentence, he got 5 life sentences, which is a total of 957 years, and he served his time in Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. So during this time while he was in prison, he actually grew to feel very remorseful for the crimes that he committed, and he actually became a born-again Christian. So that is pretty crazy. And when he was in prison, he was actually attacked by 2 prisoners. The first one tried to slit his throat, but it didn't kill him. He just had an outside wound. And the second, he was cleaning the showers with another prison mate, and the prison mate beat him to death, and he died in 1994 due to head trauma from the attack. Our next killer is Richard Ramirez. He was born in February 28th in 1960, and as stated in the article written by the True Crime Library in 2022, he tortured over 25 victims and killed more than a dozen. Richard Ramirez didn't really have a too specific victim type, but you can kind of see a pattern where he mostly killed women or couples in their homes. He doesn't really have a standard MO, but as looking at his crime scenes, he a lot of the times left satanic symbols because he was a known Satanist throughout his life. His sentence was a death sentence, and he was sentenced to the gas chamber in California, and he actually spent 23 years on death row, but he never got that punishment because he died in 2013 from lymphoma. The last killer is John Wayne Gacy, who is also a pretty known killer. He was born in March 17th in 1942, and as stated in the article written by the Crime Library in 2022, he killed 33 victims, which I think is the most out of these 3 killers. And most of these bodies were found under his house. He would bury the bodies under his house, and he kept it like a collection. And for all these years, he never got caught. His victim type was young boys and men, and his MO is he would lure his victims in by dressing as a clown, lure these tiny children in, and he would rape and murder them. He was sentenced to death row, and he actually died from that lethal injection in 1944.